Welcome back to Sikkim 365 Radio. It's time for Craig Smoak's Off the Radar. Brought to you by Pickup Outfitters. Since 1997, we've been outfitting trucks, SUVs, and vans at 220 Lake Air Drive or createacommotion.com.
All right, welcome into Off the Radar. Taking a look at a few stories we otherwise might not touch on or discuss all that much. For example, we don't spend a lot of time on the NBA, but I'm going to start off with the NBA here. And Ben Simmons, talk about a problem child. The Ben Simmons story, a summary of the last year or so for him. Game 7, 2021 Eastern Conference Semis. 76ers are competing for a spot at the for an NBA title. And Joel Embiid, after Ben Simmons decides to pass open open dunk, Joel Embiid cited that as a turning point in the game. You might remember that, right? The whole non-dunk and a lot of questions about how tough Simmons is and things like that. And Doc Rivers was asked after the game about it and if Simmons was a good enough player to be a championship point guard, could he lead a championship team? And Rivers responded at the time, I don't even know how to answer that right now. So if you're Ben Simmons, you did do some kind of chicken-esque kind of move in the eyes of many people out there, and you did leave yourself open to a lot of questions about why you would pass up that opportunity. And look, it's not just that. There's been plenty of things with Ben Simmons, but he really, that got him in his feelings in a major way. So Simmons had 4 years left on his contract, and he decided last August he didn't want to be on the Sixers anymore. And he told them that, and he said he wanted to be traded and said that he'd be willing to miss training camp to make them trade him. And the Sixers have looked around, and they've tried to trade him, but they have not reached any agreements. And then he started to say that, he didn't play well with Joel Embiid. It's just it's always something with this guy. So then he didn't play well with Joel Embiid, and that their time was up. They had run their course together. And Simmons then missed training camp and did not play in the preseason and then put his home up on the market for $3.1 million, his Philadelphia home. So the Sixers would start withholding money, and they put $8.25 million in escrow that would have been owed to him on October the 1st, but he's not showing up to anything. He's missing everything. So they put the $8.25 in escrow. So that's a quarter of his near $32 million contract that he's owed this year. Ben Simmons is owed $32 million. NBA contracts are just disgusting in a good way. So he comes back in October. 8 days later, gets thrown out of practice by Doc Rivers, and that was due to declining to substitute into a drill several times. He gets suspended for one game, their season opener, due to conduct detrimental. He had been fined previously $1.4 million due to his absence from preseason, missed practices, on-court meetings. This is like a whole Wikipedia thing on just the last few months for Ben Simmons, right? So then this just keeps going back and forth. He's absent again. He tells him it's a mental health issue, which that's why I think some people question the mental health thing sometimes, because he very well could be dealing with that. And then also at the same time, with all of his other shenanigans, it kind of seems like it might have been a cop-out, but who knows? Point of the story is the Sixers had stopped fining him. They start fining him again. He gets repeated fines. He becomes the most fined player in NBA history. That's a mark that he now has.
That's something Dennis Rodman's pissed about.
Yes. And then, this month, the Sixers had decided they were going to stop, they were going to limit the fines, because obviously the it's going up quite a bit, right? I mean, several $1 million. So they're going to dock, fining him for meetings and sessions and things like that, but they are going to dock him, and decided they were going to continue to dock him for missing actual games. So that leads me to this. Ramona Shelburne put out an in-depth article on ESPN.com today, just detailing where the Sixers and Simmons are, and she went into a lot of the timeline as well. But here's the big deal. Simmons has lost over $19 million in fines. $19 million in fines. His whole career, you ask? No. Since the season began, he's lost $19 million in fines, $360,000 per game, Hasn't cleared a paycheck since the $8.25 that was due to him on October the 1st. Every 2 weeks, the team sends a notice with an explanation of all the fines he's accumulated for failing to render services instead of what should be a $1.375 million paycheck. By the end of the season, if he does not play for the Sixers or any other team, he could lose another $12 million. So he's made over $60 million in his career, but he's looking at $31 million in fines in one season.
And when you that's when you get to a point where your altitude of money financially is so high.
And that leads me to his source, one of his sources. We don't give a blank about the money. That's not what this is. It's hard for people to understand, but if you believe in what you're doing and that this is not the right situation for you and you're trying to get to a better place, the money doesn't matter. Obviously, it's a financial hit, but you adjust. That is very easy to say when you already made like 20 bazillion other dollars, but
I would say that's is that a human, and I know that's kind of a human trait, right? If you make $100,000 compared to $30,000 or $20,000, or if you make $1.5, things don't affect you as much.
No, but
then yet again, sometimes the richest people are the ones who are the most stingy.
But I think what Ben Simmons has failed to learn is if you were just playing right now, it would
freaking idiot.
The money, if you were just playing, they would have already been able to trade you. One of the reasons people don't want to trade you for you is you've got a 4-year deal that they're going to have to pay all this money towards or give up prospects for, and teams don't know what's going to put you in your feelings and make you mad. So say he got traded to the Kings. A lot of people thought the Kings were going to kind of go all in on him and bring him out there. Well, if you're the Kings, the one question you have to ask is, okay, we're comfortable giving up Buddy Hield and this guy and that guy and a draft picks, and we'll make all the money work, and the NBA salary cap is kind of an illusion anyway, and all that. So we'll make all that work. But can you tell me what we have to do to avoid making him mad? And the Sixers are like, we don't know. We have no idea. Yeah. Everything makes him mad. So
here's the thing.
Money is important.
I'm not done
so
yet.
Many athletes like this.
I'm not done yet because Doc Rivers has responded. This is how the dramatic this is. And this is why I could never be a Ben Simmons fan. So according to sources close to Simmons, so all this has happened, right? He's lost all this money. He's missed dozens of games at this point. According to sources close to Simmons, he's still upset that Embiid seemed to blame him for last season's playoff loss, when Simmons did not blame Embiid for Embiid's poor showing in the playoffs against the Raptors 2 years ago. He's frustrated that Rivers didn't come to see him while he was training in L.A. last summer, and he doesn't dispute that he didn't hit reply when Rivers texted and called several times over the summer. But in hindsight, Simmons feels like Rivers and the Sixers should have done more, like show up at a well-known gym in the San Fernando Valley. Get the F out of here, dude. What a baby.
Okay.
So Doc Rivers gets asked about this, and Doc Rivers says, as far as him still being hung up on the comments and the Doc Rivers not coming to see him, and Doc Rivers said, that's the first time I've ever heard that. There's nobody that's been more supportive than me. I have a tape someone sent me of almost an hour of me over and over praising Simmons. You heard me last year every day. It's all posturing. That's why you haven't heard from me. I don't get involved in all that stuff. I'll leave that up to the front office and Ben's camp. I'm staying out of this part. But listen, some of this stuff I laugh at and I feel bad. I think Ben's a good kid. I want Ben to do well. I've always supported Ben. I want him to do well. It's just the excuses and all that stuff. One of the things I tell all my players that respect is a two-way street, especially these young guys. You can't expect to ignore us or not listen and then want us to do something different for you. You have to respect each other to be successful in life.
It's crazy. Okay, if I just pop by either of your houses unannounced in 2022, your first reaction would be,
what the F are you doing here?
Hey,
yeah.
Yes, very awkward.
There was a time.
Hello?
There was a time before cell phones where if you were out and about and needed to go see somebody, you could pop by their house and they wouldn't think anything of it, because if you pop by their house uninvited, it was either something you as friends did quite often, or something must have been up that you needed. Like, hey, Smokey, I'm making something. Can I borrow some baking soda? Yeah, here's a baking soda. Now I get the hell out of your house. But you don't just show up. You don't take a private jet and just show up somewhere, also knowing that you could go and do all that, and then Ben Simmons may not accept your olive branch.
You know, in the days of when I was growing up, and again, we all understand that's the 60s and 70s. When I'm in high school, elementary school, you could just drop in. You know, you did.
That was normal.
You can walk down. You do that now. You get you're going to get shot.
Yeah.
But I mean, people like if
there's
you
cell phones now.
I would just be like, yeah, you could have just told me because you have the things like, hey, I'm going to pop by real quick. I need to borrow your tape measure. All right, I'm home. Come on by.
Yeah, we value our privacy far more now than we ever did before, and it's just different. But yeah, that's the Ben Simmons story right now, and I mean, I just think he is super soft. I mean,
when was the last time somebody just dropped in on you? I mean,
it's been a long time.
A friend of my mom's stopped by the house to like hand us some food that they made, but that was it. Like, hey,
just randomly?
Yeah,
you didn't
they were
know?
On their way. I didn't know. And they didn't call. They're older though. They're pre-your era. They're pre-your era. Very pre.
Okay, that's old.
Could be your parents. That's how old they are. So they handed that to,
and that's what they did.
So they did.
All right, Ben.
So yeah, that's just that's just.
Oh boy,
I don't know what a mess.
That's a lot of stuff with Ben Simmons.
Yeah, it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. So yeah, he's still made millions, but he's losing millions and millions. So Major League Baseball. Spring training likely to be delayed as they still cannot get any progress going in these talks about the CBA. They had a CBA meeting, MLB and the Players Association on Tuesday afternoon. And according to, how do you say Passan? Jeff Passan?
Jeff Passan.
I always want to say Passan or something, but Jeff Passan, there was no significant progress, almost ensuring a delay to spring training. Players and executives both expect spring training to be postponed. How long is the big question? And the players have now been locked out since December the 2nd. Pitchers and catchers were supposed to arrive as soon as in 2 weeks on Valentine's Day. February 14th was a report date for many, but that's not going to be the case. MLB Players Association on Tuesday, their proposal included a drop in bonus pool request for pre-arbitration players from 105 to 100 million, blah, blah, blah. There was other reductions that were offered and things like that. But basically, there's been maybe a sliver of progress, they would even call it that, which was apparently from the union saying it was open to the idea of rewarding teams that do not manipulate a top prospect service with a draft pick. So, I mean, you get into the weeds on all this, but basically baseball is getting delayed, and they're not going to start spring training on time.
I don't know how the owners, this was coming for 5-6 years.
Oh, yeah. It's been a while.
It was coming, the Players Association knew it for a long time in that, when they put the competitive balance tax, what that long-term allowed teams to do was say, like, look, if we spend more money, we have to pay more money to everybody else. So even teams like the Yankees and Red Sox and Dodgers don't want to, they'll spend over the luxury tax for a couple years. But if you go like 1 year, 2 years, fine, but it's exponentially big. So it gives the big market teams who help drive the salaries up a reason to bargain basement people. And then you've got teams like the Rays who are never going to give people big money. So you've got all this kind of different thing there, but what it's done is it's made salaries go down the last 5 years in baseball. Well, if salaries keep going down, and listen, I know nobody feels bad for baseball players who make, a minimum of $600,000 a year, but if that was your business and they went down 5 years in a row, everybody would be like, hey, we got to stop this. Yeah. So again, it's
such an important deal for them to get baseball, set off on time that they waited 43 days between this meeting and their last one. 43 days between meetings.
Because until it is drop dead, they don't. There are no deadlines.
Yeah, so, baseball is going to get delayed, which, the video game's still coming. And I wanted to mention that Shohei Ohtani is the cover man for MLB The Show 2022.
That's awesome.
Which, that might be the only baseball we get all year is the video games, quite honestly. But he will be on Sony's MLB The Show following, obviously, an incredible 2021 season. He's the first Asian American to grace a Big Four pro sports video game cover, which is kind of cool and not a note I would have necessarily thought of, but he is. And, Shohei Ohtani is going to be on MLB The Show, joining the likes of Ken Griffey and Miguel Cabrera and Bryce Harper and so many others. So cop that, I guess, here in a few weeks. What's going on at Auburn? This was a story that was over 24 hours old, but offensive coordinator Austin Davis, we didn't talk about this yesterday, but resigned after just 1 month on the job. He said in a statement that he was stepping away for personal reasons. He's just 32 years old and was the quarterback's coach of the Seahawks the last 3 years. He was going to replace Mike Bobo on Brian Harson's staff, but now Auburn's still looking for an offensive coordinator. And I don't know if more has come out since this was initially dropped. He said it was 100% based on personal reasons, and after a decade in the NFL with a daily grind as a player and coach, he realized how much he missed his family and desired to spend more time with them. And I know Zach Calzada, who transferred to Auburn for an A&M quarterback, had like an emoji reaction probably to that news because he still doesn't have an offensive coordinator, and he thought he had one, and now he doesn't. And I don't know, maybe it is purely personal reasons, but given the rumblings we hear out of Auburn, Alabama right now with Brian Harsin, it does make you wonder a little bit of what exactly is going on over there.
It sounds like a couple of things. One, he is questioning his future or the program, or two, he's dealing with something that's far much more family-oriented that he needs to take care of, and he needs a break. And
he may personally not like Brian Harsin. That could be a personal issue, but I don't know. Brian Harsin's got to get pointed in the right direction there. I'm sure Bob Williams on the chat will tell us he's a big Auburn guy, but right now everything has just not gone well in this year for Brian Harsin.
No, it hasn't. It's been very, very off. Couple more notes. We have time for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Washington Huskies offensive tackle Jackson Kirkland has decided to opt out of the NFL draft and hopes to return to college. He's first team all Pac-12. He learned that he had an ankle injury that was far worse after suffering it during the season than he originally expected it to be. So he's had surgery today with Dr. Robert Anderson, is expected to make a full recovery, but he had almost entered the draft following 2020, decided to come back for a fourth year, had posted all the goodbyes and all of that, but he was ranked the number 10 offensive tackle in Mel Kiper's rankings, and I'm sure was probably in that vicinity in other rankings as well. Jackson Kirkland was bound for the NFL, and now he's bound to return to college football. And the last thing that I will mention here, I have to mention this because Max Olson just put this out. There's a couple more stories. I mean, Ken Dorsey, the new OC in Buffalo, replacing Brian Daboll. We kind of expected that to happen. Packers fired their special teams coach, which is also not much of a surprise. But Max Olson, a little transfer portal update. 6 months into 21-22, right? 1,354 FBS scholarship players are in the portal. 32% more than this time a year ago. 32% more players in the portal than this time a year ago. And this was an even more interesting stat. Currently on pace for nearly 20% of all college football to have entered the portal in 1 year. So that's the kind of change that's happening, and you either get on board and get with it, or you be stubborn and find another sport to like.
I just kind of hope it stays around that number.
Yeah.
Like 1 out of 5 to me is something I can deal with, and I think it is probably at the edge of reasonable. But if it gets to 25, 30, like if a third of the people are in the transfer portal, then there's an issue.
Yeah, so it's a little less than 1 out of 5 or a little more than 1 out of 5 at this point, but there's a few things off the radar.
Thank you, Craig.